just admit it. I should have flown with someone else or gone by car. 'Cause United Breaks Guitars. Yeah, United Breaks Guitars. One more. Yeah, United Breaks Guitars. I've been in a band called Sons of Maxwell with my brother Don. It's named after our dad Max, for now 25 years. And we tell people, we joke, we say that if our parents were more romantic, we'd have been cool in the gang. But they made us a duo. That's the best we could do. So we, as Sons of Maxwell, we had a great career. And I say that despite never having a mainstream #1 hit or a radio single, that sort of thing, with a major label behind us, I was very successful in the music business because I was able to do what I loved, which is write music and play it and do nothing else but that for 20 years at the time before this video came out. And so on March 31st, 2008, my brother Don and I and the two other musicians we were traveling with boarded a United Airlines plane out of Halifax, Nova Scotia, where I'm from. And they took our guitars and they put them in the belly of the plane. They didn't give us a choice for that. And we were en route to Omaha, and we stopped to Chicago to deplane and catch our connector to Omaha. And there we were sitting on the plane. I was on the left-hand side of the window. Our bass player, Mike Hiltz, was at the far other window seat. And behind him was a woman who didn't know that we were musicians. But when we landed and we were getting ready to get off, she looked outside the window, and to anybody who was listening, she just said, "Oh my God, they're throwing guitars outside." That's what I said. We were alarmed by this, so I waited for everybody to get off the plane as the band leader, and I approached the flight attendant and I said, "Excuse me, they're throwing our guitars outside." And she put her hand up like this and said, "Don't talk to me, talk to the lead agent." I said, "Where would that person be?" And she said, "She's just outside the plane." So I walked out, and going up the gangway, there was another woman from United walking up, and I called out to her and I said, "Excuse me, I need to talk to the lead agent. Our guitars are being thrown outside." And she kept walking. She looked back and said, "I'm not the lead agent." And she disappeared into the airport. So I walked up, and there was a wicket just like this one. So I walked up to the wicket, and there was a woman about to make a phone call from United. And I said, "Excuse me, our guitars are being thrown outside. Can you help us?" And she paused her phone call long enough to say, "But hun, that's why you signed the waiver." She started talking on the phone again. So you'd think it's bad enough that our guitars were being thrown around an international airport tarmac. I'd just been rejected by 3 women in 5 minutes. She finally responds and says, "Mr. Carroll, we're not responsible for the damage to your guitar. You didn't open up a claim within 24 hours, and our policy is that we are not responsible for that reason." After all that time, that's what they said. And I was really frustrated. I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. I felt like she and I had broken up. And so I immediately started typing to her without really thinking, just in real time. I said, "Mr. Ulwig, if I were a lawyer, I would sue you, or you're United." And I said, "But I'm not." And I remember looking across my office, and I saw my guitar sitting there, and I said, "I've got other tools at my disposal. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write 3 songs. And I'm going to make 3 music videos, and I'm going to try and get 1 million hits in the next year with all 3 videos combined. And I'm just going to share this story." And I said, "When this first video goes up, I'll let you know so that you can watch it, and you can help me get to 1 million that much quicker." And so my wife sits me down, and she hands me the remote, and there they had taped the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. And there was Wolf Blitzer declaring to the world in the Situation Room that this is not just a story, but it's a situation, right? And they got the big Situation Room wall screens, and my friends with their sombreros and mustaches are singing their guts out behind Wolf Blitzer, and he's rocking out too. Wolf's going like this. I thought, that's really cool. And my parents were like, "Wow, that's a popular program. We're happy for you." Because my parents have always been really supportive of everything we've done, but wow, that's a popular program. About 6 months later, I did a bunch of other interviews, maybe 200 interviews, and got the same thing from my folks every time. But finally, after 200 interviews, I got a call one day from ABC Television. It was an email. And they said, "Would you like to come on The View next week with Whoopi Goldberg and the ladies?" And before I could even answer yes, I had to call my mother, because that's her favorite show, hands down, The View. So I call my mom up, and I'm like, "Wow, this is big. I got big news. I'm going to be on The View next week." And she's never at a loss for words, but there was this dead, eerie silence, and then, "Holy F-bomb," right? Except she didn't say F-bomb. This turned my mother into a potty mouth. And my dad's like, well, that's a popular program. A week later, I come back, I do an interview with Reader's Digest, and I call my mother about other things that I mentioned in passing that I'd just done this interview. I said, mention it to Dad. My dad calls, and he's not a phone guy, but he's as excited as I've ever heard him. He's like, son, Reader's Digest, this is huge. This is going to help your CD sales. So the story went far and wide, and depending on who covered it, it was more or less interesting to the people. I thought that was really neat. And my whole experience with this has been like an onion from the inside unraveling in terms of my awareness of what it could mean. So of course, early on for me, you can expect that I was more focused on myself. And I started thinking about, this might help my CD sales, like my dad said. And so my parents had moved very close to me, and my mom has been doing our mail order forever. My brother and I have been in the business long enough that we can say we were before the internet. And we'd be touring as indie artists across the country, and sometimes people wouldn't buy a CD or couldn't or didn't for whatever reason, but would want one later. And this is before you could Google the name of a band or anything. You had to kind of be a private investigator to track down someone for CDs if they weren't in the stores all the time. So my mother and father, living in Timmins, Ontario, would sometimes get these letters from people that would say, we like your son's music, can you help us, can you mail us a CD, here's $20 cash. And my mom always thought, somebody likes my kids, so they're already good in my books. But they trusted her with $20, so as a thank you to them, she would knit them a dishcloth as packing for the CDs. Right? And we still have fans to this day who talk about the quality of my mom's knitting because they still have these dishcloths. But we were building a brand and learning how to differentiate through gestures like that. So the CD sales were big and that sort of thing, but like the onion continues to go up, I started thinking this actually is more than just me. This is music industry wide. And I said, maybe for the first time, artists can access a vast audience directly. And this is where I think you and I have a lot in common in terms of, again, being an indie artist and being independent pharmacy owners compared to some of the bigger players out there. And if you take one thing away from this today, the most important thing would be around this idea of storytelling. Your story is so important, and it's the thing that people remember. There's a great speaker named Simon Sinek who talks about why. Your why you do things, your passion. That's what people buy into. People buy into the why and why you do things. And storytelling is the road to that. Your why is best conveyed through effective storytelling. That's what sets you apart. And I got an email one day from a man who said, Mr. Carroll, I hate country music. I thought, this isn't a good way to start an email. But the next thing he said was, I love your story. I love the integrity behind the way you're handling this, and I like everything about the way you're doing it. So I'm going to buy everything you've ever recorded and what you have to sell on your website. And he did. He bought, I think, 10 or 11 CDs, and he bought some t-shirts, about $300 worth of stuff. And if I had tried to sell him what I did, it would have been a 99-cent single, and he would have passed on it. I would have lost $1. But because I shared my story instead, and that's what he bought 300 times what I would have lost if I had to try to sell him just what I did. That's the difference between sharing your story and selling what you do. You have so much more advantage, I think, sometimes over the big guys who rely on higher volumes and people just getting them through. And you have the ability to create relationships with the people who come into your pharmacies. Get to know them a little bit. Take the time, even if it's just eye contact, to acknowledge that they are there and that you respect that they're in your store. You can feel that sort of thing. You can shoot for 97% and say, congratulations at your next annual general meeting. Congratulations, everybody. Only 3% of our customers hate us. And you can't do that. You never could, but I don't think you can really do it now, because I think my story, if anything, it shows that one customer can really detract from your brand if you don't try and get it right 100% of the time. And the thing is, we know what it feels like. If you walk into a store that shoots for 100% and one that shoots for 97, it's a palpable difference. You can feel it when you're in that store. And the truth is if you have an option, you'll go to the one that treats you important every single time, because no one wants to be in that 3%. It's that important. And if you are the type of company that has statistical insignificance as part of your culture, you should probably change that right away, because your competitors will probably shoot for 100 and you will become irrelevant. So again, I think you've got a real advantage here, because you can make every customer that comes into your store feel a little bit more important than the ones who are more dependent on volume and higher numbers. Why was my video so successful? I got that question right from the very first days. And my initial reaction was, well, it's because I used humor, I used music. It was a slow news time in July of 2009, which is true. There are all these things that contributed to a perfect storm of opportunity. But in the last few years, my answer has sort of changed because I think those are all superficial reasons. I think I've managed to peel back a little bit and look deeper and listen to what other people have said. And what I've heard people say and what I've seen myself is that the reason the video was so successful is because we are connected. I believe you and me and everybody in the world are fundamentally connected with one another. We don't just say that as a way to get some enthusiasm and inspire people for 5 minutes. I really think that we do have more in common than we don't with every single person on the planet. Because the thing about caring is free and it's contagious. And no matter where it happens, where it comes from, once you release caring on the world, it explodes in all directions and hits everybody. And it can't help but affect everybody in a positive way. If you want the least expensive, most profitable way to change your business, just start caring more about every aspect of it. Your suppliers, your employees, your customers, and that will come back at you. I wish I had a more complicated explanation, but I think it's really that simple as a foundation. Then you can do it. So the lesson that I'm going to leave you with, I guess, among everything, we've touched on the importance of caring and seeing that every customer is statistically significant, and how important your story is, and why you do things is so fundamentally important, but it's best told through story. So become a better storyteller, share who you are, make a big difference. But I think the big thing to understand through my son's story is that in any business, through life, shit's going to happen. But with perspective, you have the choice to determine whether your pants are going to be half full or half empty.